This is a review of the Sony A7 II versus the Nikon D750. I'm a Nikon shooter predominantly, and I started getting into vintage glass. I bought a lot of lenses, and Nikon is not a very good camera body for vintage glass. If you have vintage glass, you could probably find an adapter for the Sony. Not so with the Nikon. So I decided to buy a Sony A7 II. So this is a real-world review. This is my experience with the Sony versus the Nikon. I would consider these both budget full-frame cameras. Canon also has a full-frame, lower-cost body, but I don't own one, so I can't compare it. So cost, brand new, the Sony is running around $1,400. Brand new, the Nikon is going to run you around $1,500. That's the current price. This is US dollars. First off, they're both 24 megapixels, so there's really nothing to compare there. The Nikon shoots a little faster. It shoots at 6.5 frames per second. The Sony shoots at 5 frames a second, so the Nikon's a little bit faster. The Nikon has a flip-up flash. The Sony does not. The Nikon body comes with a battery charger. The Sony body does not come with a battery charger. To charge the Sony body, you leave the battery in, and you plug in a USB cable. The Sony is notorious for having a bad battery. If I grab my Nikon and the battery's half full, I can do a day's worth of shooting as a hobbyist, and it doesn't matter what the level is on the Sony. I need to have an extra battery in pocket. A clear advantage to the Nikon over the Sony is that the Nikon has 2 card slots. As far as high ISO shooting, the Nikon is quite a bit better than the Sony. The Nikon goes to 51,200 and the Sony only goes to 25,600. And if you look at these shots, you'll see the Nikon. You'll see the Nikon is quite a bit better at high ISO. Oh, one big thing with these two cameras is native glass. If you're buying into the Nikon system, there is a boatload of native glass for this camera. Nikon first started selling lenses for this F-mount back in 1959, so that is a long time ago, and they've been selling film and digital lenses ever since. The Sony, the E mount it's a relatively new mount, and there's not a lot of glass out there. The glass they are selling, comparatively, Nikon, Sony, the Sony is going to cost you more for equal lenses. I know the main zoom is the 24 to 70. Sony's going to charge you $2,200 for the 24 to 70 2.8. The Nikon is going to charge you $1,800 for the 2.8 zoom. And I know a lot of the other lenses for the Sony are going to also cost you quite a bit more. Another thing to consider, if you ever want to shoot film, there's a ton of film camera bodies for the Nikon system. So if you're ever going to shoot film, Nikon is a better system to go with. Now the Sony has eye autofocus and Nikon does not. But this particular body, this is an early implementation of the eye autofocus, and it does not work very well. It's single focus only, not continuous. That's a bit of a disadvantage right there. And it also has to be programmed in with a programmable button. You can't just turn on eye autofocus. So it's the implementation is very poor on this body, so I don't recommend that as a reason for buying the Sony. What about shooting with these two cameras? The Sony is a much more enjoyable camera. It's a smaller body. You see, it's a much smaller. I like it. It's smaller, it's lighter, it's easier to kind of have in my pocket or have around my neck. I have the 50mm for each camera. The Sony 50 is larger than the Nikon 50, which I prefer the smaller lens because if you're out shooting, you want something small. The Sony seems to focus slower than the Nikon on the Nifty 50. I have no experience with any other lenses on the Sony, only the 50mm 1.8. It kind of hunts around before it locks on, whereas the Nikon focuses around that spot and you're locked in. So the Nikon has faster focusing on the 50mm 1.8. The Sony has image stabilization. The Nikon does not have image stabilization. As far as video, they both shoot regular 1080p at 60 frames a second. Different codecs for the Sony than the Nikon, but I think they're both relatively similar. I think you may have heard that the Sony menu system is relatively poor compared to the Nikon. Yeah, so the lens is the big selling point on both of these cameras. The Nikon lens system is, they've been building them since way back, and they've got 50mm, 35s, 28s. They have so many Nikon lenses. if you want to get into film, you're going to want to go with a Nikon. Okay, quick review. The Sony is going to cost you a little bit less up front. Megapixels, no difference, either camera. The shoot speed, frame per second. Nikon has the advantage. Flip-up flash, battery charger, battery life, 2 card slots, high ISO, native glass, cost of new lenses. Nikon has the advantage. With film bodies, of course, Nikon has film bodies. Sony has the advantage when it comes to eye autofocus and body size. The Nifty 50, the 50mm 1.8, Nikon has the advantage there. Image stabilization, the Sony has the advantage, and it is very good image stabilization. I've tried it, I like it. And of course, video is equal either way. And the menu system, of course, Nikon has the advantage there. The big advantage to the Sony over the Nikon is, like I said, vintage glass. If you have vintage glass, you could probably find an adapter for the Sony. Not so with the Nikon. So if you're a vintage lens shooter, you're going to want a Sony over a Nikon. So you may be asking yourself, if you can find an adapter for virtually any vintage lens for your Sony, why bother buying a Nikon? Because you can just take a Nikon lens and put it on a Sony. Actually, that's a good idea, and you can. But if you're going to be shooting Nikon autofocus, you want to get a Nikon body for that. Nikon autofocus lenses work very poorly on a Sony body. I think mirrorless potentially is where the future of photography is going, but for the budget-minded, a DSLR is a very wise choice. So bottom line for me, when I'm out making money, I'm holding my Nikon. When I'm shooting for fun, I'm holding my Sony. Well, if you're interested in purchasing the lower cost full frame body, hopefully this helps you out. And thanks for watching, and please click the like and subscribe button to help support this channel. Now get out there and shoot.